All right, hey guys, Tim Horton here. We're going to talk about reel selection. More importantly, gear ratio selection when we're talking about fishing crankbaits. You know, I could get 15 or 20 crankbaits out here, but we're going to break it down into shallow runners and deep runners. You know, shallow runners can be a lot of things, from this Boss Hog by Azuma here, which is, you know, a wart type bait that's really going to fish in the spring, and you're going to crank it really slow around rocks. This clawed hopper, which is kind of an elongated square bill, gets a little bit deeper than most square bills. One of my favorite lures on Lake of the Ozarks, Table Rock Lake and those places up in that area. And then we're going to break down the big stuff. This here's the Z-Boss 24. We're going to start with this, and I think there's probably not a technique in any style of bass fishing other than flipping and pitching that you got to have the right gear on. There's nothing more important when you're deep cranking than being able to make a long cast. There's not another reel in the industry that you can make a cast as long as the Lew's BB1 Pro. The reason being is the distance between where the spool ends, where the line comes out, and where the level wind is. There's a greater distance here. It's going to cause less friction. If you can think about, trying to think about the scenario of that line coming off the reel, and it's got to go through here, and it's at the opposite end of the spools, and it's snaking back and forth. The further away that is, the less of an angle it's going to be, creating less friction, and that lure is just going to launch off the reel. It also has a lot of line capacity. This one right here I broke off yesterday, so I'm missing a little bit of my line, but I've still got enough line capacity to fish it correctly and do all the things that I need to do. When you think about a low profile reel and less line capacity, you're talking about a Team Lew's Custom Pro. We're going to get to this in a little bit, but you can see this spool is narrower. It's going to fit in your hand a little bit more. This is more when I'm target fishing with crankbaits, throwing square bills or lures like the clawed hopper in and around shallow rocks or brush or things like that. When I'm throwing this, I'm offshore and I'm not throwing to a target, and it's all about distance. It's getting as much of a cast into it as you can. The rod's also important. This is a 711 Ducket. It really has a lot of load to it, you know, a deep cranking rod that I designed. But here's the reason. This is actually a 6:4 gear ratio, and I have only gone to this in the last 5 or 6 years. Early on in my career, I like the 5:1, things like that, the slower gear ratios. But this BB1 Pro is geared so strong that I was able to not lose strength and being able to fish this reel and being able to fish it at that speed. You know, to me, when I make a long cast and I fire it out there, the first 10 or so turns, I'm really burning that thing. So I want to get all of my stretch out and really get that bait to diving down. Then after that, it's just a steady retrieve that you're able to do. And another big thing is this big handle. You know, it's longer than most handles, and I like the new grips that we have that are kind of concaved out some. They protrude out, and it really gives you a grip to be able to hold on to when you're deep cranking all day long. The Lew's BB1 Pro series is just the absolute best deep diving. Everything from the Z-Boss 10 all the way up to the Z-Boss 25. When I'm cranking offshore, that's what I use. Now, as we get more into shallow cranking, you know, this can consist of everything, even from a lipless crankbait. This is the new Azuma Heavy Z. You guys are gonna love this when you see this. Guys at Guntersville, Toledo Bid, pre-spawn. It's gonna be really cool. It's a 3/4 ounce body in that bait. But this right here is a reel that I'm going to want to hold and have more control of it. I love the new wind grips on them. Again, the way it concaves out and really allows you to have a lot of grip. Now, here's the reason I use the higher gear ratios. This is actually an 8:3:1, and I can milk this. I even like this anytime I'm throwing the Boss Hog, because I can slowly crawl it. I'm talking just barely move it. But I like that high gear ratio because I'm not concerned about strength. You're not having a lot of torque, you're not having a lot of pull coming back at you from a deep diving crankbait. So therefore, the lower gear ratio on this, the higher gear ratio on this just works really good. And I love this Hyper Mag, man. It's just fits in my hand good, makes cast really well. Just a nice, comfortable, all around reel. But again, if you're in the 7:1s in the gear ratios, you're right where you need to be, even the 6:1s. But I like the high speed. Now, I'm always going to fish higher speed on the shallower diving crankbaits than I am the deep diving crankbaits. The rod is even just a tad bit stiffer. This is just a 7.3 medium heavy in the White Eye series again as well. But that's really how I break it down. And if you stick with that, you're going to find a lot more success. One thing I tell people, regardless of the deep diving crankbait that you're throwing, stay consistent, because you're going to know that turn, you're going to know that speed. If you're alternating between a 6:4:1 and a 5:1:1, you're really changing things up a lot. It's just like on your depth finder when you're graphing offshore. I don't like to keep mine where it's bouncing around on auto. I'm gonna keep the range set on manual. That way a 5-pounder is always gonna look like a 5-pounder. The screen's gonna stay the same. When you're using gear ratios, it's the same. We've all got the same roll with our wrist. We're all steady with it when we're cranking, and allow that reel to stay the same too. That way you're not constantly making adjustments. So anyway, that's my tips. Shallower the crankbaits, higher speed reels, deep diving crankbaits. I love that BB1 Pro and the 6-4-1, just works really, really well. So, all right guys, see you guys right here next time on Advanced Angling.
And if you don't know, now you know.